Quotations from myself, segment 59, quotation number 746. If I had to describe my emotions while viewing several clips of pornographic movies, put together as illustration of what has been censored out, the sexual arousal will not most certainly be one of them. Rather, it was a mixture of excruciating boredom and uncontrollable laughter. The boredom produced by incessant and monotonous repetition of the same worn-out sexual cliches, an appalling poverty of imagination, even when trying to talk and act dirty and perverse, the laughter by the sheer ridiculousness of the whole situation, including the script, music, cinematographic technique, bodies and faces of actors, props, the works. The only conclusion I can make after viewing these clips is that people who produce those movies and people who do watch them must be very dull, if not stupid, and probably completely lacking any sense of humor. If I had the power to prescribe pornography, I would have done it not because pornography corrupts, but because it inflicts a cruel, unusual punishment on human intelligence. But so, alas, a lot of other things in life do. 747. The way to the top, especially one has to start from the very bottom, is plentifully bestrewn with the obstacles of humiliation, insults, degradation, abject servitude, etc., etc., etc. And those who eventually reach the summit are usually so damaged, hurt, and embittered by such an experience that they want all who follow them to pay as high a price for the success as they did, and would do whatever it is in their power to make sure of it. 748. The desire to be listened to and the need to be heard are the essential attributes of man. For us, an animal can hear, but none can talk. Only man has developed the ability to speak in order to fulfill this need and desire. And to deny a man the free exercise of them is to deny him his humanity and to reduce him to the animal state. But since no man can be reduced voluntarily to such a state, sooner or later such a denial causes a revolt, violence of which is proportional to the degree of the denial. 749. Ignorance is not a bliss. On the contrary, in life, with its increasingly unceasing struggle for survival, it is a weakness, since what we don't know is more likely to hurt us than what we do know, which may help us to do something about it. Again, ignorance would not protect us from harm and pain, but since we are ignorant of their causes, would only impair our ability to prevent them. 750. One may, relatively easy, get accepted by almost any group of society, any group or society, as long as one is willing and able to be what one is not. But if I am not as I am acceptable, then when I pretend to be somebody else in order to gain acceptance, it is not me but the pretender who has been accepted, and I can never erase from my consciousness the fact that I am, as I am, still unacceptable, and nothing therefore has really changed, and I feel as rejected as before. $7.51. As I look back at my life, I see it as a long process of learning how to do without one thing after another. And now eventually the time has come when I'm afraid I have reached the point when I'm not sure whether I really want or need anything anymore. 7.52. If one looks at the history of Judeo-Christian faith, both as a whole and as divided into separate stages in its development, as a relay race, where the placement of each member of running team is relatively unimportant, where they are all running toward the same goal, and what counts the most is a collective effort, then the position of the Israelites as the chosen people, which is so grating to many, can be thought of as just that of a runner who simply started the race and then passed on the baton to Greeks, who in their turn handed to the Romans, Roman to Europeans, and so on and so forth. In this view, the placing order is essentially irrelevant, and no runner is more chosen than the other as far as the end of the race is concerned. To continue using a relay race as a metaphor, if one observes that moments of passing on the baton coincided with significant, even drastic, changes in the secular as opposed to religious history, if one believes that God, was creating man the way man is, has essentially predetermined the human history, or if mankind be given another chance to start afresh from Adam, it would undoubtedly repeat history in general all over again. The apparent contradiction between God predestination and man free will could be removed, at least as far as human history at large is concerned. Then this history may also be compared to the river formed by continuous confluence of million individual free wills, perpetually added to its body, without changing its inexorable flow into predestination direction, like rivulets by joining the river don't change its course. And though this river is conceived sometimes under attribute of a secular history, at other times under attributes of religious one, it is one and the same river. Thus, the predestined development of a secular history produces a predestined development of a religious one, and vice versa. 7.53. To learn how to cope with the vicissitudes of life, one has to descend at least once to the very bottom, which is admittedly highly subjective, for what one is one's man's bottom could be another man who knows what. And if one survives it, then anything faced after wouldn't look half as bad as the worst experienced already, and hopefully would be easier to deal with. 7.54. One can only imagine the tremendous effect the rediscovery of Greek and Roman classical writers of antiquity had on men of the medieval Europe, where ignorance and superstition reigned supreme, when even now, 500 years after the triumph of Renaissance and several centuries of Enlightenment, the writers like Cicero and Seneca, Lucretius and Virgil, not to mention Plato and Aristotle, still sound as fresh and unsurpassed as ever. Moreover, after the acquaintance with such a treasure of human thoughts, Renaissance itself was simply inevitable, for one can go from ignorance to knowledge, but having obtained knowledge, one cannot go back to ignorance. The way of truth is the way of no return. Once you know something, you cannot go back to not knowing it. 755. Nothing could be as damaging to a poet's sense of self-worth as a poet that to completely rely on the reaction opinions of other poets, for their reactions are seldom genuine and their opinion lack objectivity, which only non-poets can offer. Yet in today's culture it seems that the only people who are willing to read and to listen to poetry are the other poets, unless of course one becomes a celebrity. But then one knows that he is read not because of his poetry, but because of his fame. 756. One can be, and often is mistaken, about the source of one's unhappiness, but never about feeling unhappy per se, for our emotions never deceive us, only their causes. And since it is natural for a man to look for reasons of his unhappiness, the most valuable thing his friends can do for him is to help him to find the real causes of his misery, which will open at least a possibility of doing something about it. Though, of course, there is always a risk of misplacing the cause of one's unhappiness, which could do a lot of harm not only to the one who is mistaken, but also to those who are mistakenly perceived as being the cause of it. Still, it is better than trying to convince a man that he either doesn't or is not supposed to feel the way he does, for it is completely futile. Our emotions are much stronger than our will. 757. The only reason I can think of which make any sense to me why we were put on this earth and given this life to live is to help each other to get through it with the least possible amount of pain and suffering. I know it is not too much, but it is better than nothing, and it is great pity that so few are aware of it. 758. If boredom is produced by lack of something interesting, or even not so interesting to do, then depression could be viewed as the extreme form and the highest manifestation of boredom. When a depressed person not only can't think of anything worthwhile doing at present, but has lost all expectation and hope of finding it in the future, having no goals and ultimately purpose in life. Yet the cure for such a malady lies not in search for any goal, for this might only turn the constant boredom into the intermittent one. As soon as one goal is reached, the new boredom begins causing the search for a new goal, and so forth and so on. But instead, in setting for oneself the goal, the one that could never be reached, and thus would keep one going for as long as one lives.